The 9/11 attacks. On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 hijackers, affiliated with the extremist group Al-Qaeda, boarded 4 commercial airplanes at airports on the U.S. East Coast. At 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 took off from Boston's Logan Airport. The 5 hijackers that boarded took control of the plane about 30 minutes after takeoff. The hijackers stabbed and attacked crew members, forced the cockpit doors open, and locked the pilots out, rendering them helpless. The passengers on board were mostly unaware of the scale of the attack until the plane turned sharply toward New York City. Passengers called loved ones to say their goodbyes, while flight attendants made desperate calls to airline staff, reporting the hijacking and begging for help. But by 8:46 a.m., it was too late. Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at over 470 miles per hour, instantly killing everyone on board and hundreds in the building. 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. The impact tore through the building's steel structure, instantly killing hundreds on the floors of impact. Fires ignited on multiple levels, fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel, causing tons of smoke, explosions, and fireballs. By 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. Less than half an hour later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower fell, creating a massive cloud of dust and debris. Meanwhile, at 9:37 a.m., Flight 77, which was also hijacked by 5 Al-Qaeda terrorists, crashed into the western side of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, at over 530 miles per hour. The crash created a massive explosion that tore through the outer walls and ignited fires fueled by jet fuel. All 64 people on board died instantly, along with 125 military and civilian personnel inside the building. The final plane to crash was Flight 93, which took off from Newark at 8:42 a.m. and was hijacked by 4 terrorists. The passengers quickly learned about the other attacks through phone calls from loved ones and realized their plane was part of the coordinated strikes, so they made a plan to storm the cockpit and stop the hijackers. Unfortunately, the plane crashed into a field in Shanksville at over 500 miles per hour. All 44 people on board died, but the passengers' bravery prevented the terrorists from reaching their intended target, likely the U.S. Capitol or White House. Nearly 3,000 people died that day, and more than 6,000 suffered life-altering burns and trauma, including firefighters, police officers, and civilians. It was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in history, and major networks broadcast the events live on television, allowing the entire world to witness the catastrophe as it unfolded. Beslan School Siege. On the morning of September 1, 2004, it was the first day of the new school year in the town of Beslan in North Ossetia. While parents and children gathered for opening ceremonies, heavily armed Chechen and Islamist militants stormed school number 1. More than 1,100 people were taken, with over 770 of them being children from ages 3 to 18, and they were forced into the school's gymnasium as hostages. The attackers were led by militants connected to Chechen separatist groups and demanded Russian withdrawal from Chechnya. Initially, Russian authorities refused to negotiate with the attackers and even downplayed the number of hostages. The captives were held for nearly 3 days. Hostages were packed tightly inside the gym with no food or water. Temperatures rose, people collapsed from dehydration, and parents later described children crying silently to avoid angering the gunmen. The attackers wired explosives to the basketball hoops and walls, meaning any sudden movement could trigger a blast. On the second day of the hostage situation, explosives erupted inside the gym. Whether accidental or purposely triggered remains unknown, but chaos followed as Russian security forces moved in. Gunfire and explosions tore through the school while hostages tried to escape. Some children had to run barefoot through smoke and debris while being shot at just to make it out alive. In total, at least 334 people were killed, including 186 children, and over 800 were injured. The global impact was immediate and horrifying. Images of wounded children shocked the world. In the years since, the attack has remained deeply controversial. Many parents and survivors felt anger and frustration at how the rescue was handled, causing lots of protests and public outcry, believing mistakes were made that cost lives. Questions about delays, the use of force, and conflicting reports fueled public distrust. Today, the ruined school stands as a memorial as one of the deadliest terrorist attacks involving children. The Tikrit attack. In early June 2014, ISIS militants began their assault on Tikrit, a city about 100 kilometers north of Baghdad, shortly after dawn. ISIS wanted to expand its territory in Iraq and take control of key cities. The goal was to spread fear and chaos through mass killings, and Tikrit was a provincial capital, making it a high-value target. The militants moved through the city in dozens of vehicles, carrying automatic rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and wearing suicide vests. They moved in coordinated waves, attacking police stations, military checkpoints, and government offices. By mid-morning, gunfire and explosions echoed across the city, forcing terrified civilians to flee into alleys and basements. Families reported being trapped in their homes as militants went door to door, shooting anyone they suspected of resisting. The violence escalated through the day. Witnesses described streets littered with bodies, while cars and government buildings were on fire. Soldiers and police tried to mount a defense, but were quickly overwhelmed, killed, or captured. Reports suggest that hundreds of people were killed, and even more were injured. ISIS's stated goal was to seize Tikrit entirely and demonstrate their power by spreading fear across central Iraq. News outlets reported the rapid advance of ISIS to neighboring countries, prompting US-led coalition airstrikes in the region. Survivors recall hiding under beds and hearing constant gunfire and explosions, terrified for their lives. Even years later, Tikrit shows the scars of the attack, with destroyed buildings and displaced families reminding the world of the human cost of ISIS's rise. The Paris attacks. On the evening of November 13, 2015, a coordinated series of terrorist attacks struck Paris, targeting the heart of the city. ISIS militants carried out shootings and bombings at multiple locations, including the Bataclan Concert Hall, Stade de France Stadium, and several cafes and restaurants. Attackers were armed with AK-47 rifles, explosive belts, and hand grenades, creating chaos across the city. The first attack began around 9:20 p.m. near the Stade de France during a France versus Germany soccer match. 3 suicide bombers tried to enter the stadium to cause mass casualties among the tens of thousands of spectators, but security fortunately stopped them from entering. Still, the bombers detonated themselves outside during the soccer match, causing 1 casualty but creating a panic among thousands of spectators while making social media headlines quickly. About 15 to 30 minutes after the bombing, 3 ISIS gunmen opened fire at cafes and restaurants in the 10th and 11th arrondissements, shooting indiscriminately at diners and pedestrians. Witnesses described people in complete panic, diving under tables, running through streets, and hearing dozens of gunshots. Local police arrived within minutes of the shootings but were outgunned by the heavily armed attackers. At around 9:40 p.m., 3 heavily armed ISIS militants stormed the Bataclan Theater, where the rock band Eagles of Death Metal was performing. They held an audience of around 1,500 people hostage, firing continuously and using explosives to intimidate the crowd. Some people at the concert jumped out of windows to survive. Many were injured, and some even died trying to escape. The attacks were part of ISIS retaliation against France's military involvement in Syria and Iraq, aimed at terrorizing civilians and gaining global attention. By the end of the night, 7 of the 9 gunmen had been killed, 130 civilians were killed, and 400 injured, making it the deadliest attack in France since World War II. In the aftermath, Paris went into lockdown, and France implemented stricter security laws, increased border controls, and more rigorous refugee vetting. The Bataclan Theater has since become a memorial, honoring those who lost their lives and serving as a stark reminder of the devastating reach of terrorism. The Musha Church Massacre. In April 1994, the Rwandan genocide erupted after President Juvenal Habyarimana's plane was shot down. In search of refuge, thousands of Tutsi civilians fled their homes looking for protection. Many believed churches would be safe havens because they were traditionally respected even during conflict. One of those places was Musha Catholic Church, located in Kayonza district, east of Kigali. Word spread quickly that killings were happening across the country. Families walked for hours, some barefoot, carrying children as they gathered inside the church compound. By mid-April, thousands of civilians were packed inside and around Musha Church, hiding and waiting for the violence to pass. But the church was not spared. On the day of the attack, Interahamwe militia and government-aligned Hutu extremists arrived at Musha. They were armed with machetes, clubs, spears, and firearms. The attackers first surrounded the church, cutting off escape routes. The assault began with gunfire and grenades, followed by militia storming inside. Panic broke out instantly. People tried to hide behind pews or shield children with their bodies. The attackers moved methodically, killing anyone they found. Those who tried to flee were chased down and killed outside the church grounds. Witnesses described hours of slaughter. Some victims were left wounded and later killed when attackers returned to finish the job. By the time the militia withdrew, thousands were dead. Exact numbers are difficult to confirm, but estimates range from several thousand civilians killed at Musha alone. Today, Musha Church stands as a memorial, with human remains and preserved damage serving as a reminder of how places of refuge became killing grounds during the act of terrorism. If you liked this video, subscribe for more content.